Hello everyone, I'm David Vaucher. Welcome to Return on Racing. Return on Racing is powered by Vaucher Analytics, which helps race teams and drivers drive efficiencies off track so that they can fuel success on track. Return on Racing is also brought to you by the Motorsports Sponsorship Accelerator, the most cutting edge resource out there to learn how to find, maintain, and grow long-term sponsorship relationships. If you're interested in finding out more about this, please visit the Vaucher Analytics website at www.vaucheranalytics.com and click on the link in the navigation bar. As it turns out, sponsorship is a great segue into an episode I really hadn't planned on making. But as I was going through my feeds, I had a great piece of content basically come to my attention, and I just really wanted to share it with you, the listeners. So let's just get right into it. If you are listening to Return on Racing, you're probably deep enough into motorsports that you know who Zak Brown is. Zak Brown is the CEO of McLaren Racing, and they have been on an absolute tear, not just in Formula One, but also IndyCar. And I want to touch on that as the subject of this episode in a moment. I want to go back to Zak Brown first, though. Now, you probably knew that Zak Brown was actually a pretty accomplished racer early on in his career. But what you may not know is that he made the pivot to the business of motorsports by dealing with sponsorships. He essentially professionalized the marketplace, turned that into a company called JMI, which he later sold, and that became his launching point to become the CEO of McLaren Racing. Now, this is important because Zak Brown knows what he's talking about, not just when it comes to driving a car, but also the business of motorsports. So when he says something, people pay attention. And what really caught my attention was something that he said in an interview on the David Land YouTube channel. So let's just get right into it because I really want to share how he validated what I've been saying all along about IndyCar and growth in that series. As I said earlier, when someone with the stature of Zak Brown speaks, the motorsports world listens. So when he recently sat down for an interview with David Land, which I'll link in the show notes, and said the following quote, I paid close attention because it's almost word for word what I have been saying for months. Rather than read this quote to you, though, let's just go ahead and hear from Zak Brown himself as I play you this clip from the interview.
To see, we talk a lot about cost containment, which is very important, but you can't cut your way to success. So I think more of the conversation needs to be around growth than cost containment. They both have their place, but I think we probably should spend 75% of our time on growth, 25% on cost containment. I'd say we kind of spend 75% of our time on cost containment and 25% of our growth. And I think we need to be the other way around.
In an article I wrote several months ago now, which I'll link to in the show notes, titled Addressing Cost Escalations in IndyCar Via Growth, I wrote, quote, while it is always important to operate efficiently and be vigilant to organizational cost creep, the most long-lasting solution to controlling costs is to outrun them with increasing market size and revenues, end quote. Now, that alignment is not coincidental because it points to a fundamental tenet of business in any domain. That's that the right investments lead to growth. So teams and series leadership, and in this case, IndyCar, are increasingly recognizing that you can't save your way to sustainability. I understand that initially this is a really tempting first course of action because you can cut costs quickly, and in the short term at least, you might start to see what look like promising results. But over time, perhaps you start to realize that doing so is cutting off your nose to spite your face. Now, pardon the gruesome analogy, but that really is what tends to happen when we look at cost cutting as the only way forward. Now, let's be clear, cost inflation is real, but so is the growth opportunity. As I detail in another piece titled The $3,000 Helmet, an IndyCar case study in compliance-driven cost inflation, which I'll also link to in the show notes, I wrote that IndyCar teams are grappling with cost inflation driven by three different factors. Those are nominal inflation, technical inflation, and market inflation. While prudent cost management is a pillar of any successful business, an overly defensive posture risks undermining the product itself. And Zak Brown says as much. If you listen to the full quote, which I've got in the article, he says it'd be better to play more offense than defense. And indeed, that's why the smarter approach is to double down on strategic growth. Now, to be clear, this isn't about claiming credit or trying to be first to an observation or insight. It's about showing that serious thinking is converging around a clear strategic imperative, and that's that IndyCar must grow to survive. So how do we turn these insights into action? Well, I already outlined a roadmap to help IndyCar and its stakeholders shift from cost defense to growth offense, and I want to go over the high points here. The first order of business would be to fix the fan funnel, and this would be by leveraging new media platforms such as Netflix style content and digital engagement to bring in younger, more diverse audiences. Incidentally, Zak Brown also believes these channels are underutilized because he states in the interview that IndyCar is underperforming on digital platforms as measured by KPIs, key performance indicators such as activation, communication, and fan engagement. I thought, as did many others, that Fox's Super Bowl campaign was a good start. I really enjoyed the short commercials on drivers such as Alex Palou and Joseph Newgarden. But where's the momentum on that? It's time to scale these efforts smartly and then massively. Second point would be to develop the talent pipeline. Labor cost inflation is a huge driver of overall cost inflation. And if you don't believe me, go look up some of the stories about hiring of crew chiefs and experienced engineers. So the way to combat this would be to invest in training and recruiting programs that widen the pool of skilled engineers, mechanics, and staff. And this would address some of the issues facing IndyCar in two ways. Over time, you would grow the available labor pool and put more downwards pressure on labor costs. But more importantly, in the nearer term, by building a passionate pipeline of young IndyCar fans, you hope that they become evangelists for the series as well. And so as they tell their networks why IndyCar is so awesome and why they love it so much, hopefully viewership goes up and of course associated revenues go up as well. On the manufacturer side, you want to give them a reason to join, and this is very key, stay. And as I'm talking about this, I'm thinking about engine regulations. So very briefly, there are two suppliers, Chevrolet and Honda. Honda always seems to have one foot out the door, and my understanding of the economics, even though I haven't delved into them too deeply, is that it doesn't make a ton of sense. There's some money losses involved. And so as IndyCar is at kind of a crucial juncture in its growth, it should consider taking a page from the WEC and IMSA. These two series have had a really amazing run in drawing in manufacturers, which has led to more fans watching, which has led to more manufacturers wanting to take part, McLaren being one of them. And so the idea with these new regulations would be to let them showcase innovation and differentiate their brands. Because if they feel like the ROI is there for their expenditure, even if they might be losing money on one aspect, if they're making it up on the back end, they will want to stay. And for those interested, I've got another piece I'll link to in the show notes comparing video game platforms to motorsport series. And if you're at all familiar with that landscape, you'll see it's not much of a leap to make to motorsports. But the idea is always the same. Bring in manufacturers, get a really full, really exciting grid, and eventually the fans will come. Next point is to make the new chassis launch a massive moment. As a fan, what I don't want to see is a quiet unveiling of the new chassis. This project was already years in the making when its launch was pushed back another year from 2027 to 2028. Fans need a massive payoff for their patience, and potential fans need an exciting hook. The new chassis launch can absolutely be both, so please, IndyCar, make it an event. Think livery shows, cross promotions with influencers, partnerships with tech and lifestyle brands. Really, all options should be on the table to reach a dynamic audience hungry for IndyCar, both now and in the future. And finally, I really hope that IndyCar can build a consistent, multi-channel strategy that drives engagement. This goes back to some of the comments that Zak Brown made, but the idea here is to use storytelling and behind-the-scenes access consistently to activate fans, both new and not existing yet, both emotionally and commercially, because this is key. It's not just about building engagement to watch races. We know that IndyCar has a calendar with gaps, and in any motorsports series, there's an off-season. If you can build engagement with drivers, with teams, or just with IndyCar, people will make it a part of their lifestyle, and that in the end will drive revenues. So there's a shared vision now. Zak Brown echoed something that I said a couple of months ago. Really, what's the point? Well, ultimately, hopefully it leads to the growth of IndyCar generally. Zak Brown's comments show that leaders in the sport are no longer content to tread water through cost containment alone. They're looking for sustainable, strategic growth, and they're willing to say so publicly. And you really have to assume that this is not something just being said on a YouTube channel. I really do believe that Zak Brown is using his powers of persuasion, his business skills, his knowledge of motorsport to drive these conversations behind the scenes. And honestly, why wouldn't he? If IndyCar grows, Aero McLaren should grow as well, and ultimately that just leads to more revenues and more upside for everyone else. So all of these words are really encouraging. It also means that the real work begins now, and I am optimistic that it is occurring and that we're in for some really excellent IndyCar racing in the future. I want to end on that positive note and say thank you as always for joining me here on this episode of Return on Racing. If you enjoyed these comments and you want more of them delivered directly to you, please consider signing up for the Return on Racing newsletter. This is a weekly newsletter that delivers insights on sponsorship developments, technology developments, and just motorsports generally in less than 500 words. So the idea is to deliver insights to you directly in an efficient package so that you can apply them immediately to your day-to-day operations. If this is something you're interested in, please visit the Vaucher Analytics website at www.vaucheranalytics.com. You can sign up directly from the front page. Again, I want to thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with me on this episode of Return on Racing, and I'm really looking forward to sharing more thoughts with you on the next one.